The Mets have a new first baseman slash DH, Terry Collins, sounding off on the current state of affairs for the New York Mets. And yes, we're doing it. The Tatsuya Imai free agency preview edition of the Bleav in Mets podcast. That's Jack McKessie. I'm Chris Schubert. Another episode of the Bleav in Mets pod, all things New York Mets. Jack, a lot has happened in Mets land since we last talked. How are you, my friend?
I am so much more excited to talk about the New York Mets today than I have been in the last several episodes because as we're recording right now on December 16th, nothing bad has happened to the Mets roster for 2026. We haven't seen any major free agent departures. We haven't seen any teams sign one of the Mets' top targets. We haven't seen any massive trades go down that hurt the Mets' chances to win the 2026 World Series. So I am excited to talk about the one big move that the Mets made that I think is very positive for the roster, as well as preview Tatsuya Imai finally, because I am so interested in the pitcher profile that this guy has.
The last two episodes are titled "The Mets Lose Edwin Diaz for 2026" and then "The Mets Lose Pete Alonso as Bad Vibes Continue." So happy that that's not going to be in the title, Bad Vibes for the New York Mets. Let's start with the roster move that they made because they have a new first baseman slash DH. It's Jorge Polanco, a 2-year, $40 million deal. A higher AAV than many probably expected for Jorge Polanco, but it is the David Stern's New York Mets special, smaller term, higher AAV, and they get themselves a guy who had an 821 OPS last year, a guy who hit 26 home runs, a guy who hit 265 in a very pitcher-friendly ballpark, is a switch hitter, can be a DH, has some defensive versatility, which we will get into, but overall, Jack, it looks like the Mets understood they needed to add a bat to this lineup, and they added one in the form of Jorge Polanco.
So David Stearns has said that the plan for Polanco is to play first base, a lot of first base, something he does not have much experience doing at the major league level, you could say. I think as we stand here right now, sit here on December 16th, I've referenced the date twice now, I think this is more of a move for a bona fide daily DH, the likes of which the Mets really have not ever seen since the DH was adopted in the National League. And obviously right now, as the roster's constructed, Polanco would be the guy to play first base. But Chris, I am thinking ahead as far as we still have multiple more months in this offseason. I think it's a lot more likely that Polanco ends up playing way more games as the Mets DH on a day-to-day basis than he ends up playing at first base.
Do you remember when we did the Devin Williams breakdown episode and you said that you liked the Devin Williams signing a lot more if Edwin Diaz was brought back and they were a tandem? I like the Jorge Polanco signing a lot more if he is the DH rather than he is the first baseman.
Correct.
Because all of the numbers tell you that the Mets got themselves a very good hitter. He can hit from both sides of the plate. We knew the Mets needed to get that versatility in the lineup. Shout out to Mike Petrelio, who shared this actually the day that we're recording the episode, that Jorge Polanco had the largest strikeout rate year-to-year drop positively in history. It was a 13.6% change, and we know that one of the skill sets that the Mets really prioritize is command of that strike zone, not striking out, putting the ball in play, making good contact. Jorge Polanco went from a 29.2 strikeout percentage in 2024 to a 15.6 rate in 2025. So just checks a lot of boxes, has some power, hit well against both lefties and righties with
Switch
the Mets,
hitter.
right? And so it just checks so many boxes for what this lineup needs. And again, the Mets still need a lot more on the offensive side. They need a starting left fielder. I still think they need a first baseman. There are areas where they need to get better, but this is a nice middle of the order bat that's probably going to get a little bit more pop now, because he's out of Seattle, was really clutch last year for Seattle. If you like those kinds of things, being able to, he hit, 2 home runs off of Tarek Skubal in the postseason. So this is a guy who has a flair for the dramatic, is able to hit from both sides, can hit lefties and righties, and just checks a box for the Mets. And, as we talk about the DH versus the first base conversation, if he ends up being the everyday DH, the Mets had that once when they had JD Martinez, who would play every day as the DH. And even then, it was a JD Martinez on the back nine, the 18th hole of his career, and he
Yeah.
wasn't the player that he was 2-3 years ago. This is a Jorge Polanco who's coming off a really good season and hits for a decent average, gets on base, can hit for power. Defensively, he's not great at second base. Luckily, the Mets have Marcus Semien there. And so it's really just this first base thing that I think complicates everybody's feelings on it, because the New York Mets told you by not giving Pete Alonso a 5-year deal, one, we don't think the bat's going to age very well, but two, we don't think Pete is an everyday first baseman. And you turn around and you sign somebody who's never played a lick of first base in their professional career. And that's where I just keep coming back to, they may say out loud that he's going to play a lot of first base. It just feels like they are protecting themselves in case they don't get a first baseman, because I'm still wishing Ryan O'Hearn is on this roster next season. Like, that's still the dream. Like, Ryan O'Hearn, Okamoto platoon at first base is still the dream with Polanco as the DH. But this is, and again, I hate to bring up the Pete versus Jorge Polanco conversation, but the Mets got a player in Jorge Polanco statistically, had a better year than a lot of major leaguers that you would expect to have better years than Jorge Polanco. And they got him for $20 million a season for 2 years. They got a short commitment, and they're not paying a super high AAV compared to some of the other players in the sport. So I like it. I understood it. I will like it a heck of a lot more if he is playing the DH spot every day than he is playing first base, because run prevention, defense, we know how important it is to David Stearns. He's emphasized it here in the offseason. This would be a weird, quirky move. I don't care that they think he can do it. Like, I don't care that they think he's athletic and the skills translate. Like, this isn't Moneyball. This is like literally the Scott Hatterberg scene in Moneyball, where they're like, yeah, it's easy. Just teach him to play first base. And then Ron Washington goes, it's extremely difficult. Like, I just don't know if it's a natural transition. So that's my only hang up with it. But other than that, like, this is just a good move for the Mets to add a bat like Polanco's to the middle of the lineup.
Yeah, I'm exactly with you in that. I think this is a really good move right now as an addition to the lineup as far as hitting goes. I really like that he's been able to improve in his, later stage in his career. He's 32 now, and he's able to bring that strikeout rate down so much over the course of a season. And I am going to like it a whole lot more, like you've said a couple times now, if the Mets are actually adding a real first baseman into this lineup, into the field as well. What I'm interested in seeing, Chris, is if this addition of Polanco as a guy who they say will play some first base, but also has the versatility to play second and to play third. I wonder what this means for a Mark Vientos and maybe a Luis Angel Acuna or Ronnie Mauricio, because I think this is a move in bringing in Polanco for a couple of years that kind of makes those guys redundant in as far as their roles, especially Mark Vientos as a guy who the Mets kind of slotted in, and maybe Fangraphs slotted in to play first base or to be the DH for the Mets in 2026. With Brett Baty starting at third base for the foreseeable future. I wonder if the Mets are starting to put the pieces in place to move one or multiple of the infielders that I've named, because right now, I mean, they're just loaded up on second baseman and third baseman, and they still need a first baseman, even if they say Polanco's going to play there. But I just am seeing a vision start to come into focus where they bring in Semien kind of as the first piece, the first big move of the offseason to play second base. And now they have Jorge Polanco, who they're saying will play first. We know Lindor is going to start at shortstop. We know Brett Baty's going to start at third base. So that kind of leaves a lot of guys playing time and position and value to the team up in the air.
Well, that's why the soup du jour over the last 36 hours has been the mega trade that everyone thinks is going to happen between the Mets and the Padres, because to your point, there's McNeil, there's Acuna, there's Ronnie Mauricio. There's Vientos, if you want to throw him in there. There's this glut of excess that the Mets have on the infielder side. And that doesn't include Jet Williams, who the Mets are going to want to try to find a spot for. And if we're being honest here amongst friends, he's the guy you probably want to clear the deck for. Like, I don't want Luis Angel Acuna's presence to stop Jet Williams from getting an opportunity. And so that's why you're seeing, and it makes sense, right? That the Padres have a need in that regard. The Mets have the excess. The Mets need pitching pitching. The Padres want to shed some of their salary. Nick Pivetta is the name that's been thrown out there. And so you can understand why the two teams are being linked. I think it's easy to do that. It's harder for the two teams to actually meet up on value. Everybody's like, oh, these two teams match up perfectly. Those deals never happen. But I understand why that's happening right now is because the Mets cannot, I don't think the Mets can go into the start of the year with Vientos, with Mauricio, with McNeil, with Acuna, all. When I say in the mix, I just mean in the organization on the roster. Like they have to flip some of those guys into other tangible pieces that can be contributors because you have Jet Williams, because you have Carson Bench who you're trying to open up spots for, and roster spots being taken up by guys that you don't have a path for just isn't good roster building. And so I do think that there will be a move that releases this glut. I just don't think it's going to be this super mega blockbuster that everybody thinks it's going to be, where the Mets get Mason Miller and Nick Pivetta and Ramon Laureano back and, a 12 play. Like all these rumors keep piling on top of each other to where if it does happen, this is going to be like a 14-player deal with all the names that have been thrown out there between the two sides. One more note on Polanco, though, I want to share. His 821 OPS, just a couple of the names that he was better than in OPS last year. How about Fernando Tatis Jr.? How about Cody Bellinger? How about Francisco Lindor? How about Seiya Suzuki? How about Manny Machado? Mike Trout? I mean, Gunnar Henderson, Spencer Torkelson, Wilson Contreras. I mean, this is who he was better than. And just a couple of names who he was better than. Brent Rooker out in Sacramento, he was better than him. That's how good Jorge Polanco was last season. So the Mets aren't just adding, any old middle of the order bat. They're adding a bat who last year was one of the best in the sport and was better than a lot of household name players. So you love it. I love it a lot more if he's the DH. Again, run prevention, get somebody who's got sure hands over there at first base. If it's a Ryan O'Hearn, if it's an Okamoto, whoever it ends up being, even a Ty France who's got some good hands over there at first base, get somebody who's more defensively solid. Because I think then if you go Beatty, Lindor, Semien, and then a defensive-minded first baseman, man, your infield defense is so much better than last year.
Yeah, and this is such a David Stearns move, like something we didn't really expect. Like I don't think either of us had Jorge Polanco on our bingo cards for the 2026 roster, but as far as the pop that he adds to the middle of the lineup, as far as the versatility that he can add to the defense, obviously you're hoping for no injuries, but Simeon's on the older side, and you never know with Brett Beatty with kind of the up and down trajectory his career's had so far. And on top of all that, to bring in a guy on the upper side of 30, on the other side of 30, and do it on a 2-year deal with a $20 million a year AAV, like that's just kind of the exact deal that we would expect for David Stearns to be making. And it really will help the Mets, if not at first base, then definitely at the DH position, which again, like you said, like we've talked about, the Mets have not had anyone be able to settle into that role and really take it ever. Like JD Martinez was the one other example, and he wasn't the JD Martinez of old, like you said. So I love that he's a switch hitter. I love that he's got some pop. I'd love to see a first base move, but this is such a David Stearns move to a T, in my opinion, and I think it's really going to help the outlook for the lineup in 2026.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to compare apples to wrenches here, but Jorge Polanco last year had a much better year than Kyle Tucker did in a bunch of different statistics, and Kyle Tucker's going to probably get a 7-8 year deal, maybe a 10-year deal worth a lot more money. And so this is where David Stern shows you his philosophy of, if the market comes to us on a 3 or 4 year deal, sure, I'll play in these big waters with these big names. But if not, I'll get somebody like Jorge Polanco who's going to cost me less overall, and it's a shorter term, and I free up opportunity for Jet Williams or Ryan Clifford or Carson Bench or Jacob Reimer, all these guys down the road, AJ Ewing that the Mets have in the pipeline that they're really fans of, that they think can be a part of their future. So, just a typical David Stearns move out of left field. You're not considering it, and you're like, once it happens, you're like, this makes so much sense. Like this is, of course, this is what the Mets did. Before we get into Tatsuya Imai, I do want to also talk about the comments that Terry Collins made the other day when he was on Baseball Night in New York on SNY. And this is a former big league manager, and not just a former big league manager, but a former manager of the New York Mets, somebody who, let's face it, it's the last Mets manager to go to the World Series. He took the 2015 team there, and he had David Wright, he had Cespedes, he had Matt Harvey. Like, he had personalities and egos that he had to deal with. And I think his quote It's easy for you and I to say this as baseball fans and people who study the sport and love to deep dive into the sport. It's different when it comes from a guy who was in the weeds, who had a manager's office, who dealt with this kind of stuff. Quote, this core has not won. Maybe it's time to go with a different core, end quote. I mean, there you go. Like, why Brandon Nimmo and Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso are all not back on this team? That's why. It didn't win.
It's
It's not Pete's fault. It's not Edwin's fault. It's not Brandon's fault. But collectively, it hasn't worked. So you have to make changes. And the changes, unfortunately, came with those three players that were either movable or free agents that the Mets could move on from. And so I'm sorry, but Terry Collins knows the thing about winning baseball and, making playoff runs and having the right group to go on that kind of run. And so if he's saying it, it's not outlandish for you and I to say, you know what, maybe the Mets decided and David Stearns decided this needs a reset. And this was the way that they thought was the easiest path to hitting that reset button.
it's almost literally exactly what we were saying in our most recent episode after Pete Alonso left for Baltimore in free agency. It's just a matter of winning, and it's something that the core was not doing. I mentioned in our last episode, since Terry Collins managed the Mets in 2015, there has not been a lot of success playoff-wise, postseason-wise, in the 10 years. It's been 10 years since that World Series run. The Mets have made the playoffs 3 times. They lost in the wild card round twice, and the third time was kind of a magical miracle run to the NLCS against the Dodgers with the OMG Jose Iglesias good vibes of 2024. It made a lot of sense when you look at without the rose-tinted glasses and you think really critically about what 2025 looked like. Sure, they were an 83-win team, and sure, they only missed the playoffs by a game. Chris, remember those August and September games that we had to watch where the Mets looked like one of the worst teams in baseball, and their record reflected that as we were seeing it happen in real time? Like, this was a core that just was not set up to even make the playoffs last year, let alone go on a run for the World Series. And I think a big part of that is the way the roster was constructed in terms of the Nimmos and the Alonsos of 2025 and years past. But also, I'm really interested to see what the Mets are going to do with their rotation going forward, because I think that was part of the reason things crumbled late was they got off to a really hot start in March, April, May, and then by the time we got to July, August, September, things kind of fell apart a little bit. And I don't know if you have any more to say, but I think that could be a good transition into talking about Tatsuya Imai.
Yeah, I mean, I have, let me just see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tabs open to talk about Tatsuya Imai on the other screen. So yes, I am ready. But I just think this entire offseason, the word I would use to describe it is the reimagining. Like, there's just a reimagining of what the Mets want to be as a baseball team. And it's clunky. It can be frustrating. It can be emotional and upsetting because players that you just loved watching play Mets baseball, because again, I will continue to say it, it's not exactly Pete Alonso's fault that the Mets didn't win. He had a great year last year. It's not Edwin Diaz's fault the Mets didn't win last year. He's been a great closer since coming here. But unfortunately, it's not always the people that are exactly at fault, and it's never just one person. It's never just one player. It's never just one position group. It was a collective failure last year, and this just felt like the cleanest and easiest path for the Mets to make the changes that they wanted to make, and we are starting to see that happen in real time. And I think it's going to continue with the glut of infielders that we talked about. It may happen with a David Peterson or Kodai Senga trade. It may happen with the reimagining of this bullpen, but it's going to look a lot different, and it could look a lot different in the rotation if the Mets choose to break out the checkbook, because it's going to cost a lot of money to get Tatsuya Imai in the fold. Could be upwards of $150-200 million for Tatsuya Imai, which has me a little concerned that this episode is just going to go by the wayside here, that we're just going to be watching Tatsuya Imai play better for another team. But man, everything about this guy I love.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's like, I mean, I think just the epitome of Tatsuya Imai is the quote that he had to Daisuke Matsuzaka, former Met,
Former Met great.
saying that he wants to take down the Dodgers. Quote, I may as well. Of course, it looks fun to play alongside Ohtani, Yamamoto, and Sasaki, but I think being able to beat a team like that would be one of the most worthy things in my life. And that's just the kind of energy that I think the Mets should be jumping all over as a team that hopes to contend in the National League against the Dodgers for a World Series appearance and obviously eventually a win.
Yeah, the 27-year-old who's been posted this offseason by his team. I'm going to probably butcher it. The Sayatami Saibu Lions. He's been there since 2018, 58 and 45 in his career over there, a 3.15 ERA, 907 strikeouts, a three-time NPB All-Star in 2021, in 2024, and in 2025. And just looking at the numbers last year, went 10 and 5 with a 1.92 ERA. Yes, 10 and 5 with a 1.92 ERA. How about this for you? 5 complete games, 3 shutouts. That's how great he was. And if you think that was a fluke, the year before he had a 2.34 ERA, went 10 and 8 in 25 games, had 2 complete games and 1 shutout. Over the last 3 seasons, he's had 9 complete games. Imagine saying that to a Major League Baseball fan in 2025. The thing about Tatsuya Imai is the under the hood numbers are just absolutely incredible. He throws 5 pitches. He throws a fastball, a slider, a changeup, a cutter, and then I don't know what is it a sinker? I don't know exactly what we're calling it. The fifth pitch that he throws, but he's just there's a lot of red on the NPB version of Statcast that I have up here on the other screen. It is great. So he's got the four seam, the slider, the change, the split finger, the split change, and the curveball. He throws just all 5 of those pitches. It's the slider that really stands out. That's the pitch that is nasty. It's kind of like a fork ball in some ways.
It's like a reverse slider. Like it spins to the arm side.
Yeah, he uses it 33, or I should say last year he used it 33.3% of the time. It got a 45.9% whiff rate, like just silliness with that pitch. Stuff plus, it's not actually his best pitch. That graded out as a 167. His best pitch is his changeup. That graded out at a 181 stuff plus. Just for those of you, 4 pitches above 100 in the stuff plus department. His fastball, his slider, his change, and his split finger all graded above 100. And it's just it's an excellent combination of some nasty stuff, the ability to throw it in the strike zone, the ability to generate whiff, has some decent velocity on the four seam, strikes out at a really high rate. His strikeout rate last year, let me get the numbers here again because I had them just a second.
I think I have a 27.8% strikeout rate, and I was also very inspired and happy to see that his walk rate has consistently gone down over the last his entire career.
Yeah, 20.7 strikeout minus walk rate, which in doing some research would have been good for 12th in all of baseball. It would have slotted him just behind Christopher Sanchez, Logan Webb, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. It would have put him just in front of Hunter Brown, Dylan Cease, who just got $210 million from Toronto, Nick Pivetta, Freddie Peralta, Kevin Gausman, Max Fried, and Carlos Rodon, just to name a few of the pitchers that he would be in front of. So it's really just all about what you think of his ability to make the transition from NPB to Major League Baseball. But the stuff looks just excellent. The underlying numbers. Where's my StatCast page here? Because I want to just gush over all of the fancy analytics. His pitching WAR, 99th percentile. His strikeout rate, 97th percentile. His fastball velocity, in 96th percentile. His fastball pitching value, 79th percentile. His breaking pitch value, 100th percentile. Like, just not going to get any better than that. His strikeout rate against right-handed batters, 99th percentile. His strikeout rate minus walk rate, 99th percentile. I mean, you name it. It's just red for Tatsuya Imai. He was just excellent last year. He's been excellent over the last couple of years. And to me, if you're going to spend big time money on somebody in this market, I would rather spend it on Tatsuya Imai than a over 30 for Framber Valdez and over 30 Ranger Suarez. I would rather give out a contract to Tatsuya Imai over Dylan Cease, who got $210 million from the Blue Jays. Like, this guy's 27 years old. He's had a history over the last couple of years of being an elite pitcher. He's got an elite repertoire. He's not just relying on 1 or 2 pitches. He's got a bunch of stuff that he can throw. And it plays. Like, it just feels like it plays.
Yeah, it's so cool to see all of the metrics that have excelled in NPB and think about what kind of work that the Mets and their new pitching staff led by Justin Willard will be able to work with him on. I'm thinking specifically about that weird sinker Vulcan change thing that he has going on that he mostly deployed against lefties last season, and to great effect compared to in previous seasons. in the seasons before 2025, he struggled a little bit against lefties, but adding that changeup slash sinker thing, plus the fastball and the gyro slider that he's got going against righties, really made his numbers pop against both hitters on both sides. And I was looking at Yaku Cosmopolitan, who, by the way, huge shout out to him because
Yes,
he is
ton of research that I used for this
he is I
episode.
think the best English speaking coverage of Japanese baseball that exists right now. He was giving some player comparisons for Tatsuya Imai, and he threw out Luis Castillo, Joe Ryan, even Trey Savage was another name because of the high arm angle that Imai throws with. And those are the kind of names that, as a Mets fan, I get really excited about because, I mean, Joe Ryan is a guy that the Mets have been tied to earlier in this offseason. I believe in previous seasons, they've been tied to Luis Castillo in trade talks. Like, this is the kind of guy that the Mets could really used as an addition to their rotation, a guy that projects as a 1 or 2 starter, a guy that can start a playoff game for the Mets in 2026 and beyond. And like you said, Chris, he's 27, and if he's able to make that transition from NPB to MLB, that's something that will really benefit the Mets in terms of long-term outlook, flexibility, because they're not tied up with a 31, 32 through 36-year-old pitcher where at the later part of that contract, you're not as excited about what he can bring to the table. So I really am getting myself too excited about the prospects of Tatsuya Imai.
Yeah.
Like, we talked about it offline, I think, when we were talking about doing this episode in the first place. Like, he's just a little bit below Yoshinobu Yamamoto in terms of the excitement that I felt for a pitcher coming over from NPB. And obviously Yamamoto putting together one of the greatest World Series pitching performances we've ever seen. It's that level is what I'm kind of expecting to see from Imai when he ends up in North America and in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and I have the NPB equivalent of Statcast again open on my other screen, and just something that stands out to me every time I look at his page. Against righties last year, he basically threw 2 pitches. He threw his four-seamer 53.4% of the time, and then he used his slider 38.8% of the time. He mixed in the other stuff, but it wasn't a big number. The slider generated a whiff 53.2% of the time. Like,
I mean,
it's just silly. Like, you know it's coming. You know that if it's the slow pitch, it's the slider, and yet it's still just something that the hitters could not catch up to. And he got a swinging strike 28% of the time on the pitch last year. Against lefties, he mixes in the changeup more, which makes sense, right? Righties, that's what they do to throw off lefties. They throw that changeup. But yeah, I mean, he still generates some just great numbers. Still a 36.2% whiff rate on his slider against left-handers. And in general, this is a ground ball pitcher. Generates 50% ground balls last year, which plays right into exactly what the Mets are trying to do with defense and run prevention. And so the Mets would be well suited for him. Again, it's just a question of what you think his ability is to make the transition. And while this is not something you can put stock into, him saying that he wants to face the Dodgers and be on a team that takes down the Dodgers, you just feel like he's got the right mental makeup to go through whatever speed bumps there may be. And it just feels like he has a repertoire that where I think of Shota Imanaga a little bit here, Jack, where when he came over, the question was, okay, he doesn't throw very hard. Like, the four seam doesn't have a lot of velocity. Is he going to be able to locate it? And is the angle going to confuse hitters enough to keep them off balance to allow him to be successful? And I would say mostly a mixed bag for Shota Imanaga. Like, when it's looked great, it looks like Cy Young caliber. When he's struggling, the Mets have gotten to Imanaga actually a couple of times where they've been able to get to him. So with Imai, I don't worry about that. He throws 95. It can top out at 99. And there's just so many other tools in the toolbox that he could turn to where he doesn't throw his curveball a lot. Maybe he needs to throw it a little bit more over here in the majors. And so it just feels like he's more equipped to deal with any speed bumps that come. I don't know. I'd have no problem giving him $150, $200 million.
I wouldn't either. I think what I'm going to be most interested in seeing, whether it's with the Mets or with another team, is how well that team is able to develop those tertiary and quadtertiary. Tetra fourth pitch.
There you go.
Because, like we talked about, the fastball and that gyro slider are by far his 2 primary pitches. He's added that Vulcan split change / sinker thing. I think when we looked at what happened with some of the Mets pitchers who struggled last year, I think specifically about Sean Manaea and kind of the two-pitch pitcher that he was, and Kodai Senga to a certain extent with the fastball and the split, the ghost fork rather. I wonder if Imai is going to be able to add a third and a fourth pitch to be a more well-rounded starter in the majors, because I think at a certain point, hitters are really good. They're going to figure out your fastball. They're going to figure out how to hit that gyro slider. I mean, Luis Castillo and Joe Ryan are guys who have similar pitch shapes, and obviously they're not Cy Young winners perennially. So it's going to be interesting to see what Imai is able to do once he comes over and what kind of development. I am just like fantasizing about the kind of work that Willard and the Mets staff can do, kind of molding this young pitcher into a future playoff starter. I'm thinking about watching Nolan McLean throwing his nasty sweeper with his nasty backdoor sinkers and his nice four-seam fastball, and then Imai on day 2 in the rotation with the high-speed fastball and the gyro slider. But don't want to get too ahead of myself because I don't know if the Mets are going to win this betting war.
No, and, again, we're talking very highly of Imai because we both do like him, but he's not Yamamoto. Like, Yamamoto was, I think, another level above Tatsuya Imai just because I think with Yamamoto, there was more trust and belief and faith in all of the secondaries, right? Where with Imai, it's mainly 2 pitches and he has a third that he throws to lefties and then he has a mixed bag that he goes to. Where with Yamamoto, it felt like it was more a well-rounded, established repertoire that he was coming over to the pros with, hence why at 25 years old, he got $300 and something million from the Dodgers, and the Mets were willing to go there as well. I will tell you, the reports out there that the Phillies are interested in Imai, it would be, you want to talk about another bad day in the Bleav in Mets podcast, the episode where we have to talk about Philadelphia Philly Tatsuya, I would rather him go to the Yankees.
I mean, Mets might not even have to face him if he goes to the Yankees, at least in the first year.
The report today from Jared Diamond of Wall Street Journal had the Yankees, Chicago Cubs, and Phillies listed as top suitors. There's a lack of the New York Metropolitans in that story.
I'm going to choose to just believe in David Stern's vision, and if Imai is going to be a part of that future vision, then we'll see. If not, I'm hoping that the Mets are able to bring in a similarly capable top of the rotation, playoff starting caliber starter to add to the rotation, because Imai is currently the top of my wish list for the Mets offseason right now.
Yeah, and we talk about the Mets needing to get a middle of the rotation arm behind Nolan McLean, and I think it's fair to say Nolan McLean's the ace of this team, and that's okay going into next season, but they want somebody to slot in behind him. Imai just feels like the best. Like, I would rather Imai than, Ranger Suarez or Framber Valdez. There's just, I think, more upside. There's more risk, for sure. I will grant you that there's way more risk, but those guys are over 30. You worry about the length on the deal that they want. Like, if you have to give a 6-7 year deal to Tatsuya Imai, like, I think I'm okay paying him until he's 34. Like, I get those years on the front end that are going to be extremely valuable. So if that's what it takes, I would have no problem going there. But I am preparing myself to watch Tatsuya Imai in another uniform next season.
Yeah.
Also, before we leave, Clay Holmes dressing up as the Santa, that's bad news. That's very bad.
I am adoring the fact that Nolan McLean, Jonah Tong, and Brandon Sprout are going to be the elves, though. Well, I think that's phenomenal.
That I like. But we know that there's the curse with whoever dresses up as Santa normally has either a bad year or they get hurt.
Yes.
Or both. And
not
so
ideal.
That's troubling. That's troubling.
And another indication that the Mets really need to be looking out for another starter to add, because
David Stearns has to factor in the Clay Holmes Santa factor to his roster building.
Exactly.
So maybe they won't trade David Peterson and or Kodai Senga because they'll know that they'll.
They're not Santa. They're not Santa this year.
No, they're not Santa this year. No, they're around. But yes, I love the young starters being the elves. I can see Jonah Tong in that elf, like in my mind's eye. It's like picture perfect. I can't wait to see the pictures from the photo shoot that they do at the holiday party. That is going to do it for us. Another edition of the Bleav in Mets pod in the books. I believe next up should be the Cody Bellinger episode of the Bleav in Mets pod. We did Kyle Tucker. We've had a couple of heartbreak episodes. Now we're back on track with Tatsuya Imai. Cody Bellinger, maybe the most likely of the 3 free agent episodes that we've done so far, would be my guess. The Mets apparently still very in on Cody Bellinger as of today, so definitely still a possibility. But that is going to do it for us. For those of you new here, please rate, review, subscribe to the podcast, share the show with a friend and a fellow Mets fan. We greatly appreciate it. You want to watch the show over on the YouTube side of things, Jack McKessie, McKessy. We love the support we're getting over on the YouTube side of things, so shout out to everybody who's watching us over there and watching some of the social clips and content we're putting out over there. But that's going to do it for us. We're back again later on this week to talk Cody Bellinger and whatever else happens in Metsland. Until then, let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.